Before we even set up camp, Jim told us something that I wasn't even expecting. That we shouldn't sleep alone. Not because of bears, not because of weather, not because the camping was going to be rough, but because if something actually happened at night, if activity actually happened, that someone being alone in their tent might not react very well. And at first, I thought, okay, that might be a little dramatic. But later, once the woods got quiet, I started to understand why he said that. Because I came out here thinking that I was joining a Bigfoot expedition. But pretty quickly, I realized that this trip wasn't just about Bigfoot. It was about fear, expectations, and strange noises in the night. And what happens when a whole group of people wander into the woods wondering the same thing? What if something happens tonight? This whole thing started in Bailey, Colorado, at a place called the Sasquatch Outpost. It's part trading post, part museum, and part gathering place for people who are curious about Sasquatch stories in Colorado. The owner, Jim Myers, has spent years gathering stories from people who say that they've seen or heard strange things in the mountains. Strange sounds, footprints, and even figures in the trees. That feeling that something's close by, even if you can't see it. But then Jim invited me to do something different. He took us out on an expedition out into Yampa Valley in Colorado, an area that he says has even more activity than Bailey. They've even seen a bunch of footprint molds come out of the area. So instead of one guy camping alone, I've headed into the mountains with a group of people who are all wondering what the night may bring. And before we even got there, I constantly kept thinking about that rule. Don't sleep alone. I want to say this up front. I'm not here to prove that Bigfoot is real. And I'm not here to make fun of people who believe that they've experienced something. I'm here because I think this gets at something that I think every backpacker understands. What happens when the woods get dark? What happens when the sounds start? And what happens when your brain doesn't have a clear answer for what it just heard? Because whether the explanation is wildlife, weather, fear, expectation, or something that none of us fully understand, the experience can feel real. And how you react in that moment matters. A couple of weeks ago, I asked my community, what feels the most unsettling after dark on a backpacking trip? And the top answers wasn't animals. It wasn't feeling alone. It was actually strange noises. Over 56% said that. And honestly, that makes sense to me. Because most backpackers don't need a Bigfoot story in order to understand that feeling. You can be experienced. You can be rational. You can know all the normal explanations. But when you're in your tent and something snaps a branch outside, or you hear movement in the trees, the whole forest can feel different. Not because the forest really changed, but because your brain did. And that's what made this trip interesting to me. Bigfoot is the mystery, but the real subject is what happens to people when the mystery starts making noise.
Well, here's the thing about this area. This is called the Flat Top area of Colorado because it's a giant mesa. It's known for gigantic aspen trees. It's known for lots of hunting, and it's known for Sasquatch encounters. And the Sasquatch here, for some reason, seem to be particularly bold about their interactions with people.
All right, and then the ultimate question that it's on my mind right now is, what should we be expecting?
If you're sleeping next to the tent wall, they'll poke you, they'll prod you, they'll push you. I've had friends get shoved off their cot completely. They pushed them so hard. So anything could happen, but at the very least, I would expect them to come into camp.
And that's the part that I really wanted to understand. Not just the stories, but what keeps pulling people back to this area? Especially when the plan is to be walking around after dark, expecting to hear things that you can't explain. The biggest difference with this trip is the group. This isn't me alone in a tent, wondering what every sound is. This is a group of people going into the mountains together, with Jim leading us into an area that already has a reputation. And I think that changes things. A group can calm people down sometimes, but a group can also make things bigger. One person hears a sound, and now everyone is listening. One person sees something move, and now everyone turns towards that same patch of dark trees. Maybe one person feels uneasy, and pretty soon, that feeling can spread. That's what I want to pay attention to. Not just what happens in the woods, but what happens to us. And that brings me back to the rule. We were told that we needed to share tents, not because it was easier, because if something happened, if there was activity, it might not be good for somebody to be alone depending on how they reacted. And that really stayed with me, because on a normal backpacking trip, you think about safety in pretty practical terms. Weather, animals, maybe getting injured, getting lost, being cold. But this was different. This was more about emotional safety. The idea that the event itself might not be the only risk, that the reaction could actually be a risk as well. And that part I actually agree with, because fear can make people do strange things. It can make them run, freeze, maybe even abandon their plan, even misread what's happening. And out here, in the dark, a long way from town, that matters, whether Bigfoot is involved or not. During the daylight, this still felt like a normal camping trip. People were talking around camp, gear was everywhere. The forest looked like any other Colorado forest. It was beautiful, it was quiet, and it was pretty peaceful. But the real test was going to be at night, because when the lights start dropping, the forest starts to feel like it's getting smaller. Your world ends up shrinking down to whatever your headlamp can see. And everything outside of that circle of light becomes the unknown. And that's where your imagination gets a lot more room to work. One of the most useful things that I've learned in the backcountry is that fear is information. It's not always instruction. Fear can tell you to pay attention, though it doesn't have to automatically mean run. It doesn't have to mean panic. And it doesn't have to mean start making random decisions. It means to slow down, look around, and think. That matters on a backpacking trip. But it matters even more on a trip like this. Because when everyone is already expecting something unusual, fear can move pretty fast. This is the part that is kind of hard to explain unless you spent some time outside at night. The group gets quieter. They stop joking. Headlamps start turning towards sound. They listen a little harder. And because we're out here for a specific reason, every sound feels like it matters. Maybe a branch snaps. You hear something rustling in the brush. Something moving where you can't see it. And maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's some kind of wildlife. Or maybe it's just the wind. But in the moment, your body doesn't wait for a full explanation. When you hear it, you tense up. Your breathing changes. And you end up looking towards the dark. And for just a second, your brain wants a story. That's how fast it can happen out here. So I'm going to stop talking for a little bit. I'm just going to listen. Can you see what I mean? Even the silence out here is not quiet. There's still wind blowing through the trees. There's little sounds that you hear. The trees moving. There's some sounds that you can identify. Some that you can't. And the ones that you can identify, those are the ones your brain really tends to hang on to. You don't need to believe in Bigfoot to understand that. One sound can change the whole night. If you hear a branch snap and then see a deer walk away, you relax because you have an answer. But if you hear a branch snap and you see nothing, your brain keeps working. It keeps trying to build possibilities. And the longer that you have to sit with not knowing, the bigger those possibilities can get. That's why people don't always say, I heard a sound. Instead, they say, I felt something was watching me. And I'm not making fun of that, because I felt that too. A lot of backpackers have. But that feeling by itself is not proof of anything. This is where the group part gets interesting. When you're alone, your fear mostly stays in your own head. But in a group, fear can become shared. One person can say, hey, did you hear that? And now everybody's listening. Expectation is powerful. If I tell you that people have seen strange figures in the trees, you might start looking at every shadow a little differently. A stump becomes a figure. Two reflections become eyes. A tree rubbing in the wind becomes something else entirely. And suddenly you're not just reacting to the forest anymore. You're reacting to the story that your brain is telling about the forest. This is where the tent rule really started to make more sense to me. Because normally, when you're in your tent, it's really when your imagination starts to get the best of you. You're zipped into a thin piece of fabric, and you can hear everything around you, but you can't really see much. So your brain starts creating pictures for the sound that it hears. But on this trip, there's another layer. You're not alone, and that can help. I mean, having somebody else around you can help keep you grounded. So here's the simple process that I try to use when something feels off. First, stop. Don't immediately move. And then second, name what actually happened. Not something stalking us. Maybe something more like, we heard movement uphill, or a branch snapped to the left of camp. Third, look for normal explanations first. Was it the wind? Was it wildlife? Is there water nearby? Was it the branches? Was it other people? Or is some of the gear shifting and making noises? Now fourth, ask yourself if there's real action that needs to be taken. Do you need to secure your food? Should you make noise? Should you turn on your light? Do you need to move away from something? Or do you need to get the group together? And lastly, fifth, once you've done what you can reasonably do, don't keep feeding the fear. This last one's hard because your brain wants to keep chewing on it. But at some point, thinking more doesn't always make you safer. Sometimes it just makes you more afraid. And here's the honest part. Sometimes you go out looking for something strange and nothing obvious happens. But even then, the trip still teaches you something because the expectation changes the experience. You listen differently. You look differently. You feel differently. And sometimes the absence of something makes the woods feel even quieter, which in a weird way can make your mind work even harder. The morning always changes the story. The trees that look strange at night just look like trees again. The dark hillside that felt like it was hiding something, well, it just looks like a hillside. The sounds that felt kind of creepy last night, well, they're just sounds again. And that's kind of the whole point. Because the woods may not have changed, but we did. Our visibility changed. Our expectations changed. Our imagination changed. And I think that's where these kind of experiences stay with people. Because when something happens to someone in the dark, even if you're never able to completely explain it, your body remembers that feeling. Before we left, I wanted to ask Jim one more thing. And then the last question, what do you typically hope that people get out of trips like this?
One, I hope that they come away from this believing that Sasquatch exist. They are as intelligent as we are, but more than anything, convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that Sasquatch are real.
And that's probably what I appreciated about this trip the most. Whether someone believes in Bigfoot or not, the wilderness still reminds us that we don't control everything. We don't know everything. And sometimes we have to sit with the unknown longer than we expected to. So did I see Bigfoot? Unfortunately not. At least not in some obvious way. Did I hear some strange sounds? Maybe. Did I feel the group change when the woods got dark? Definitely. And honestly, that may be the most interesting thing of the whole trip. I came out here thinking that this was going to be a video about Bigfoot country. But what I kept noticing was people. How we listen, how we react, how quickly that the dark can change the meaning of a sound, and how important it is to stay calm when you don't know what's happening. That's the real lesson for backpackers. Not that every sound is dangerous, not that every sound should be ignored, but that fear needs to be handled carefully. Fear can be useful. Fear can get your attention, but fear is not always accurate. And it shouldn't be the only thing making decisions for you. The wilderness has always been a place where people meet the unknown. Sometimes that unknown is weather. Sometimes it's wildlife. Sometimes it's getting turned around. Sometimes it's a sound just outside of your tent that you can't explain. And sometimes, maybe it's a story that we brought with us. But either way, the skill is the same. Stay calm, pay attention, don't mock your fear, but don't obey it blindly either. Listen to it, and then think. And that's why this rule stuck with me. Don't sleep alone wasn't really about Bigfoot. Not completely. It was about what fear can do to a person when they're alone, tired, and unsure what they just heard. But most of the time, the most dangerous thing in the woods is not what's watching you. It's what fear convinces you to do next. So I'm curious, have you ever had a moment in the woods you couldn't fully explain? Not necessarily Bigfoot, just a sound, a shadow, a feeling, something that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Drop it in the comments. I'm actually really curious to see what you guys have experienced. And if you want another video on how fear and panic affect backpackers in real situations, then that's probably the one that you should watch next. Because whether you believe in Bigfoot or not, panic is definitely real. As always, guys, I hope this was useful for you guys. And hopefully, I see you out on the trail.